I'll never forget the morning I opened my warehouse door and froze. 6 shiny cars, SUVs, sedans, even a convertible, were neatly lined up inside my private garage engines, still warm coffee cups on the dashboards. For a second, I thought I'd walked into the wrong building. Then I saw a bright pink HOA parking permit on each windshield. My stomach dropped. They didn't just block my driveway this time. They'd broken in and turned my garage into their private parking lot. And the worst part, sitting right in the middle was a silver Lexus with a vanity plate reading K Violet. That's when I knew Karen Violet, the queen of the HOA, had officially lost her mind. I felt that familiar burn of fury rising, but I smiled instead. Because if they wanted to borrow my garage, I was about to give them the most unforgettable staycation of their lives. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And don't forget to subscribe for more wild HOA karma stories, because this one gets insane. Before the madness began, life was good, quiet, predictable, and honestly kind of boring. I'd been running my small logistics and shipping company for over a decade. My warehouse sat on the edge of a suburban business zone, separated from the nearest neighborhood by a row of old oak trees and a narrow service alley. I owned the land outright. Every inch of it, from the concrete parking lot to the large aluminum garage, was legally mine. That garage was the heart of my business. It was where my delivery trucks were stored at night, where we loaded shipments, where I sometimes drank bad coffee while waiting for the 5 a.m. crew to arrive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, built with sweat, long nights, and way too many bank loans. My small team, Jake, my head driver, Tyler the youngest and always late, and Monica, my operations manager, felt like family. We knew our routines like clockwork. Then came the HOA. The land next to mine had been empty for years, just a patch of overgrown weeds and gravel. But last spring, a developer sold it to a newly formed homeowners association called Willow Creek Estates. They built a fancy community center on it, a 1-story brick building with big tinted windows, a small playground, and about 12 parking spots. It looked harmless enough. The problem was they hosted everything there: monthly meetings, yoga sessions, wine nights, even homeowner brunches. And apparently their 12 parking spaces weren't enough for their 20-something members and their oversized SUVs. At first, it started small. I'd show up early Monday morning to find 1 or 2 random cars parked on my lot. I didn't think much of it. Maybe a guest parked in the wrong place. So, I left polite notes under their wipers. Private property. Please do not park here. Vehicles may be towed. I wasn't trying to start a war. But over the next few weeks, the number grew. On meeting nights, my entire lot would be jammed full of HOA members' cars, Honda Civics, Teslas, and the occasional BMW that probably hadn't seen a car wash in a year. My trucks had nowhere to go. Jake once had to double park our delivery van just to get our shipment out. Man, they're really pushing it, Jake grumbled, slamming the van door one evening. Want me to start handing out tow notices? I shook my head. Not yet. Maybe they don't realize. I'll email the HOA president. That was my first mistake. I found the name Karen Violet listed as president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Her email signature looked like she thought she worked for the White House bold font, a little flower logo, and the tagline, "Preserving the Beauty and Order of Willow Creek." I sent a short, polite message explaining the situation. Something like, "Hi Karen, I'm Eric Miller, owner of the adjacent warehouse property. It seems your members have been using my lot and garage area for parking during meetings. Could you please remind them this is a private commercial site? I'd appreciate your help." She replied 5 hours later with a single line. "Eric, the alleyway behind your building is considered community access. Our members are permitted to use it as needed. K Violet." I reread that message 3 times. Community access. The alleyway. My alleyway. I checked the county plat that night. The entire road garage and side yard were under my property ID, parcel 408B. I owned it free and clear. Still, I thought maybe she misunderstood. Maybe Karen Violet was just confused. So I replied again, attaching the official map and title deed with the property lines highlighted. No response. The next evening, when I arrived at the warehouse, there were 3 new cars in the lot. One of them was parked so close to the garage door that my forklift couldn't get through. And there, stuck to my sign that said, "Private property. No parking," was a neon pink post, it note. It read, "Community members are allowed temporary access for HOA events. Please be neighborly, KV." I stared at that note for a full minute before laughing out loud. Neighborly. The next morning, I printed 6 more warning signs, large, red, and impossible to ignore. Private property. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed. I mounted them along the fence, the garage, and even on the entry post. Jake noticed. You're finally done playing nice, huh? Yeah, I muttered, tightening the last bolt. Let's see if they can read. For about a week, it worked. No strange cars, no trash left behind. I thought maybe finally we could all coexist. Then came the Friday evening storm. The forecast warned of heavy rain and flash flooding across the county. I stayed late that night helping Tyler load a shipment before the storm hit. The wind was howling rain slamming against the roof like gravel. We finished just past 10 p.m. And as I was locking up, I saw headlights swinging across my lot. A line of SUVs pulled up 5, maybe 6 in total. They parked right next to my garage doors, flying open, people running for shelter. I assumed they'd head into the HOA building next door, but instead, they ran toward me. Hey, what are you doing? I shouted through the rain. Someone waved a woman in a bright yellow raincoat. Even through the downpour, I recognized the platinum blonde hair. Karen Violet. Eric, she yelled over the storm. We just need to park in here until the weather passes. In here, I asked, stunned. This is my garage. It's just rain. Calm down, she shouted back. It's for safety. Before I could respond, she gestured to a young man, probably one of her HOA members, who jogged to the garage door panel and punched in a random code. When it didn't work, Karen cupped her hands around her mouth and said, "Try pulling it manually," and that's exactly what they did. 2 men grabbed the handle, forcing the door halfway open, and one by one, the cars rolled inside. I stood there in disbelief. In the middle of a thunderstorm, 6 HOA cars were now parked inside my private garage like they owned the place. Tyler whispered, boss, are we supposed to stop them?" "No," I said slowly. "Let them finish." Because in that exact moment, soaked to the bone and staring at the audacity of these people, I decided something I wasn't going to argue, I wasn't going to email, and I sure as hell wasn't going to beg for respect anymore. If they wanted to use my garage, they could keep it, at least for a little while. I locked the warehouse door behind me, climbed into my truck, and drove home in silence. Rain pounded the windshield, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat, and one thought running through my head: they have no idea what they just started. Because starting Monday morning, my garage wasn't just going to be a parking lot, it was going to be their prison. Monday morning came bright and humid, the kind of morning that smells like wet pavement and burned coffee. I pulled up to the warehouse around 7 a.m., ready to check the damage from the storm. The clouds were gone, the air was sticky, and the sun glared against the puddles in the lot. But there they were, every single one of those HOA cars still sitting in my garage. The door was half open, rainwater pooled at the edges, and inside I could see the Lexus Karen Violet's Lexus sitting proudly in the center like it was on display at a dealership. Her vanity plate gleamed K Violet. I almost laughed. Tyler whistled when he pulled up beside me. They're still here. Man, these people don't even pretend to care. I took a long sip of my coffee, trying to steady my temper. Apparently, they decided my garage is community property now. Jake arrived next, shaking his head. "Want me to start calling a tow truck?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's see if Queen Karen shows up first." She did. At exactly 8:05, a white SUV pulled into the alley like she was arriving at her own private event. Karen stepped out in full morning glory, glory-pressed white blazer, massive sunglasses, and that permanent expression of someone who believes the world owes her compliments. 2 other HOA members trailed behind Linda, a talkative realtor with a voice like a car alarm, and Mark, the self-proclaimed vice president who wore loafers with no socks. "Good morning," Karen said cheerily, as if we were old friends meeting for brunch. "I see you discovered our cars. Sorry about that. The storm last night was awful." I kept my voice calm. "Karen, you broke into my property and parked inside my garage. Do you realize how serious that is?" She waved her hand like she was dismissing a waiter. "Oh, come on, Eric. Don't make it sound so dramatic. It's just parking." "You weren't using the space anyway, were you?" "Actually, I was," I said evenly. "This is where my drivers load shipments. You blocked every entrance." Mark chimed in, smirking. "Hey man, no harm done. We were just trying to stay out of the rain." I pointed at the large metal door they had bent off its track. "And you did that by forcing open a locked door." Karen crossed her arms. "Technically that door wasn't locked, it was just closed. You should be clearer if you don't want people coming in. There's something called shared access rights, you know." I blinked. "Shared what?" She smiled like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "The alleyway between your building and ours was originally public land before the subdivision. Our HOA agreement allows members to use it for access to community spaces. That includes your garage area. It's common courtesy." Tyler nearly choked on his coffee. Common courtesy. You mean breaking and entering? Karen ignored him completely. Besides, she went on, it's not like we damaged anything. We just needed temporary shelter. You should be more neighborly. We're all part of Willow Creek, whether you like it or not. That was when I knew I was dealing with a special kind of delusion. I opened the back of my truck and pulled out the large rolled-up property map from the county assessor's office. I unrolled it right there on the hood, tapping the bold black line that outlined my land. See this parcel 408B? That's mine. Every inch of this garage, this driveway, this alleyway, it's all private property. The HOA starts over here. I pointed to the other side of the fence. You're trespassing. Karen squinted at the map for 2 seconds, then smiled smugly. Well, we'll have to confirm that with the board. These documents can be misleading. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The board, Karen, I bought this land 10 years before your HOA even existed. She gave me a patronizing smile. Then I'm sure you won't mind me checking. You know, for everyone's peace of mind. She turned on her heel and strutted off like she'd just won the argument, Linda trailing behind her, muttering something about how rude business owners can be. Jake looked at me. Boss, that woman's got a PhD in delusion. Yeah, I said, rolling the map back up. And I have a degree in payback. By that afternoon, I had already received an email from her. From President at willowcreekhoa.org, subject garage use Eric. The HOA board has determined that your garage shares access rights with the Willow Creek Community Center under the terms of our development plan. Until this is resolved, members may continue to park there temporarily during official events. K. Violet. I stared at that message so long my coffee went cold. She was doubling down. So I replied, from Eric Miller, Karen, there are no shared rights. Stop trespassing or I'll involve law enforcement. Eric, her. Reply came within minutes. From K. Violet, oh Eric, let's not escalate things. You wouldn't want to cause tension with your neighbors, would you? I could practically hear the condescension dripping through the screen. I forwarded both emails to my lawyer, Rachel Green, just in case. The next few days were a circus. Every evening I'd find fresh cars in my lot. Sometimes they'd park diagonally across my loading area, other times right up against the garage door. Jake couldn't back the trucks out without threading between bumpers like it was an obstacle course. On Thursday, I walked in to find one of my storage shelves pushed aside. There was a folding table set up inside the garage, covered with snacks, wine glasses, and a stack of HOA pamphlets. A banner taped to the wall read, Willow Creek Monthly Meeting, Community First. That was it. I waited outside until their meeting wrapped up. Around 8:30 people began spilling out, laughing and chatting, oblivious to how insane this was. Finally, Karen emerged, clutching her wine glass like a scepter. Karen, I called. She turned, smiling sweetly. Oh, hi Eric, did you want to join us? We were just discussing community improvements. In my garage, I said, stepping closer. Do you hear yourself? Technically, she said with that awful smile, we were just using an available space. That's not an available space, it's my property. Her tone sharpened instantly. Eric, you're being very hostile. You should be grateful people are finding your building useful. You know some of us are trying to create a better neighborhood. I took a deep breath. I'm going to say this one more time. If anyone parks here again, I will have their car towed, and I will call the police for trespassing. She stared at me for a long second, lips curling into a smirk. You can't tow community members, Eric. You'd need permission from the board. The board, I repeated. You mean your little club? Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret that attitude. This neighborhood supports each other. And we don't like outsiders. I couldn't help but laugh. Outsider, Karen, I've been here longer than your entire HOA. She spun on her heel, barking at Linda to grab the leftover wine, and walked off. Jake muttered, she's gonna do something stupid, isn't she? Guaranteed, I said. But this time I'll be ready. As they left, I locked the garage behind them and took one last look at the scuffed floor, the bent door, the tire marks. My patience had officially expired. I wasn't just dealing with a nuisance anymore. I was dealing with an HOA queen who believed her imaginary power outranked property law, and soon I'd remind her exactly who she was dealing with. By the next week, the word neighborly had officially lost all meaning to me. I'd always believed that patience and decency could fix most problems. But try reasoning with people who think private property is a suggestion, not a rule, and you'll end up like me, standing in your own garage, surrounded by strangers' cars, wondering if you've slipped into a sitcom written by Satan. It was Monday again, and I had a new plan. Politeness had failed. Emails had failed. Logic had failed. So I decided to face them directly at their next HOA meeting. According to the flyer I'd found taped to my door, yes, my door, the meeting was on Wednesday night. I wasn't invited, obviously, but after everything they'd done, I figured they owed me a front row seat. When Wednesday rolled around, I left work early, put on my cleanest shirt, and drove to the so-called Willow Creek Community Hall, that smug little brick building that caused all this chaos. I parked across the street, walked past the shiny new residents-only sign, and stepped right in. The room was packed. A dozen chairs were set up in neat rows, and every one of them was filled. At the front stood Karen Violet, her blonde hair sprayed into an immovable helmet, holding a clipboard like it was a royal decree. Behind her hung a banner, Willow Creek HOA, monthly board meeting building a better community. I cleared my throat. Evening, everyone. Heads turned. Murmurs started. A few people recognized me, probably from the trespasser rumors Karen had been spreading. Karen looked up, eyes narrowing behind her glasses. "Excuse me, sir, this is a private meeting for HOA members only." "Yeah, I know," I said, stepping forward. "But considering half your members' cars are parked in my garage, I figured I qualified for a guest pass." A ripple of laughter spread through the room, but Karen wasn't amused. She smiled thinly, the kind of smile that could curdle milk. "Mr. Miller, this isn't an appropriate venue for your grievances." "Oh, I think it is," I replied. "See, I've tried emails, I've tried signs, I've tried being nice. But somehow, your people keep treating my property like it's an HOA overflow lot." A man in a golf shirt, Mark the vice president, crossed his arms. "You can't just bar access to community space, buddy." "Community space," I repeated, incredulous. "It's a commercial warehouse, not a community park." Karen raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "The alleyway between our properties is shared, Mr. Miller. You can't stop homeowners from accessing it." "That's funny," I said, pulling a rolled-up map from under my arm and tossing it onto a nearby table, "because the county zoning office says otherwise. The alleyway, the garage, even the drainage ditch, you're standing next to my property line." The room fell quiet. Karen didn't look at the map. Instead, she tilted her head and said sweetly, "You know, Eric, your tone is very aggressive. Are you sure this is the image you want to project as a local business owner?" That's when I realized she wasn't arguing facts, she was playing optics. Every sentence she spoke was meant for the audience, not for me. She wanted them to see me as the angry outsider, the rude businessman picking on the community. I almost laughed. "Aggressive Karen, you broke into my garage. You moved my equipment to make space for your wine parties." Gasps from the crowd. Karen's lips twitched. "That's an exaggeration." "Really?" I pointed toward the back of the room where Linda, the talkative realtor, sat stiffly clutching her purse. "Ask Linda. She was there last Friday. You used my shelves as a coat rack." Linda flushed bright red. Well, it was raining," Karen cut her off. "This isn't about personal attacks. Let's stay on topic." I took a deep breath. "Fine. Here's the topic. If one more car parks on my property, I'll have it towed and impounded. Period." The room erupted in murmurs. Someone muttered, "He can't do that," while another whispered, "Isn't that illegal?" Karen smiled triumphantly. "See, even our members know that's not how community cooperation works." I met her gaze squarely. "Community cooperation doesn't mean trespassing, vandalizing, and ignoring boundaries. You don't get to rewrite property law because you're inconvenienced." For a split second, I saw her jaw tighten. The mask cracked, just a hairline fracture, but it was there. Then she smoothed her expression, gave a dismissive laugh, and said, "Well, thank you for your perspective, Mr. Miller. I think we're done here." I let out a short laugh. "Yeah, we are." I turned and walked out to a chorus of whispers. Behind me, I heard Karen's voice ring out crisp and smug. "Some people just don't know how to be good neighbors." I didn't look back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the meeting in my head over and over again, every sarcastic word, every fake smile, and I knew deep down that she wasn't done. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Jake sent me photos. "Boss, you're not gonna like this." I opened the pictures and nearly spit out my coffee. There were new signs posted near my garage. Big laminated ones reading "Overflow Parking," "Willow Creek HOA Events Only," "Community Guests Welcome." And underneath, in tiny print courtesy of the Willow Creek HOA board, they'd actually put up their own signage. On my fence, I felt my pulse throb in my temples. I grabbed my keys and drove straight there. When I arrived, Karen and Mark were in the lot hammering in another signpost. "Morning, Eric," she called cheerfully, like she hadn't just declared war. We decided to help clarify the space for everyone's convenience. I parked, got out slowly, and said, "You're trespassing again." She tilted her head. "Oh, relax. We're just improving community communication. By nailing signs into my fence," she smiled sweetly. "Technically, the fence borders the access path. The board voted unanimously to approve it." I stared at her speechless for a moment. Karen, your board has as much authority here as a lemonade stand. Mark chuckled. You're being dramatic, man. It's just a couple signs. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the condescension, maybe it was the audacity. But that was the exact moment I decided that the next chapter of this little feud wouldn't be about conversation. It would be about consequences. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Karen, I've been patient. I've tried to be reasonable. But if you or anyone from your HOA parks here again, I'm done playing nice. Her smile faltered for half a second. Are you threatening me? No, I said calmly. I'm promising you. And then I walked back to my truck, pulled out my phone, and called Ben Alvarez, my locksmith, the same guy who installed the original doors when I first bought the warehouse. Ben, I said, how soon can you upgrade my garage locks to something heavy-duty? He laughed. Depends. You expecting burglars or a war? Both, I said. And I want to make sure I win. That weekend, while the HOA was busy setting up their Saturday farmers market, Ben showed up with a van full of industrial-grade locks, new hinges, and a reinforced keypad system. We worked quietly through the night, unscrewing the old panels, bolting in the new ones, calibrating every latch. By the time dawn broke, my garage doors were fortified like a small fortress. Jake looked around, impressed. Nobody's getting in there without permission. Exactly, I said. And if they try, they'll regret it. He grinned. So what's next, boss? I smiled, watching the sunrise over the HOA's pristine cul-de-sac. Next, I stopped playing defense, because something told me that Karen Violet wasn't done testing boundaries. And the next time she crossed one, she was going to learn that some property lines aren't meant to be stepped over, they're meant to be locked. By the time Friday rolled around, I was starting to think maybe, just maybe, the message had finally gotten through. For 4 straight days, my lot had been empty. No random sedans, no SUV bumper blocking the loading dock, no pastel flyers taped to my fence inviting me to community appreciation brunch. It was quiet, too quiet. And when life gets that still around a bunch of bored HOA members, it's never peace, it's the calm before the stupid. Friday evening, right before sunset, I got the call that ended whatever was left of my patience. It was Jake, my lead driver. His voice was half annoyed, half incredulous. Boss, we got a problem. You might want to come down here. I frowned. What kind of problem? The kind with music wine glasses and about 6 cars blocking the garage. I didn't even ask for details. I just grabbed my keys and drove. When I turned down the alley behind my warehouse, I could already hear it, the faint hum of voices, laughter, and a Bluetooth speaker blaring some awful pop song. My headlights swept across the building, and for a split second, I thought I'd stumbled into a bad sitcom. Because there they were, Karen Violet and her loyal HOA entourage, having what looked like a full-blown garage party. 6 cars lined up neatly inside my garage engines, off their reflections dancing under the fluorescent ceiling lights. A folding table sat right in the center, draped with a floral tablecloth. Wine bottles, cheese trays, and cupcakes were scattered across it like they were hosting a suburban royal gala. And there she was, standing beside her Lexus, with a glass of red wine in hand, laughing like she'd just conquered France. I stopped the truck, got out slowly, and just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. My jaw tightened. Jake was leaning against the loading ramp, arms crossed, shaking his head. Told you. It's the HOA Club Med now. I started walking toward the garage, my boots splashing in a puddle from last night's rain. The chatter died down as I approached. Karen turned around, that familiar smug smile already forming on her face. Oh, Eric, you made it. We were just having a little get-together. In my garage, I said flatly. It's temporary, she said, waving her wine glass. We just needed extra space while the community center is being cleaned. You don't mind, do you? I stared at her in disbelief. You're trespassing again. She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. Eric, it's just one evening. We'll be done soon. Don't ruin the fun. Behind her, Linda, the realtor who couldn't stop talking, nodded. Yeah, Eric, be neighborly for once. Neighborly, I echoed. You broke into my building. Again, Karen shrugged. Oh, please. You left the door unlocked. No, I didn't, I said sharply. You broke the latch. She smiled innocently. Maybe it was already loose. That's when Mark, the loafer-wearing vice president, chimed in with a smirk. You know, Eric, you should really be more grateful. You're lucky to have such a vibrant community next door. Keeps the area lively. I turned to him. You're blocking my company's loading zone. I can't even get trucks in or out. He grinned. It's Friday night. You're not working now, are you? Jake muttered under his breath. This guy's asking to get towed. Karen rolled her eyes. You men and your tempers. Eric, don't make a scene. We'll be out soon. There it was again, her tone. That infuriating mix of arrogance and fake calm, the kind of tone people use when they think they're untouchable. And right there, with 6 HOA cars parked in my garage and Karen Violet lecturing me on being neighborly, something inside me just switched off. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I smiled. All right, I said. Enjoy your evening. Karen blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me, you heard me, I said, stepping backward toward my truck. Have fun. Her smile flickered suspicious. You're not mad, nope, I said cheerfully. Not at all. I got in my truck, rolled down the window, and said, just make sure everyone's car is inside before you close up. Then I drove away, her confused expression fading in my rearview mirror. On the drive home, I called Ben Alvarez, my locksmith. Ben, I said, remember those industrial locks you installed? He laughed. Yeah. Why, someone break in again? Not exactly, I said. But I need you to come by first thing in the morning. We're going to reinforce everything, and I mean everything. Ben chuckled. You sound like a man on a mission. You have no idea. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen smirk, the wine glass, the arrogance. She honestly believed she could get away with anything. And you know what? She had for months. But not anymore. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not revenge exactly, just justice. The kind of justice that doesn't require yelling or lawsuits. Just a good lock, a clear conscience, and a plane ticket. Saturday morning, Ben and his crew showed up with a truck full of hardware-reinforced steel locks, digital keypads, motion sensors, the works. We waited until mid-morning, just long enough to make sure the HOA partygoers hadn't retrieved their cars yet. And when I peeked through the side window, sure enough, the garage was still full. Karen's, Lexus, Linda's BMW, Mark's Jeep, and a few others. All neatly lined up like trophies. Ben rubbed his hands together. All right, boss. What's the plan, Lockett? I said simply. Every door, every latch, every exit point. We installed the new locks quietly, efficiently. The side doors got sealed from the inside. The rolling main door got a reinforced bar with double locks. The emergency exit secured tight. By the time we finished, the garage was sealed like a bank vault. Ben stepped back, wiping sweat off his forehead. Nobody's getting in or out without you. Perfect, I said, smiling. Now, how fast can you get to the airport? He looked at me like I was joking. You're leaving. Yeah, I said. I just booked a flight. Florida. 1 week. He laughed. You're gonna leave them trapped. Not trapped, I said. Just parked. Like they wanted. Before leaving, I turned off the garage power and disconnected the keypad from remote access. Then I left a small printed sign taped to the front door. It read, "Garage closed for maintenance. Do not enter." Management? I stood there for a moment admiring my handiwork, then got into my truck and drove to the airport. As my flight took off, I couldn't help but chuckle imagining their faces when they realized their cars weren't going anywhere. I didn't check my phone the entire first day. But when I finally turned it on that night in Miami, I had 23 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a flood of emails. The subject lines were, Gold U Argent, HOA vehicles locked in Eric, this is illegal, open the garage now, or we're calling police. One message even read, you can't keep our property hostage. This is a violation of HOA rights. HOA rights. I laughed so hard the bartender gave me a weird look, but I wasn't worried. I'd already sent a note to my lawyer Rachel with copies of every photo, email, and sign showing that they'd entered without permission. And Rachel had replied simply, you're completely in the clear. Enjoy your vacation. So that's exactly what I did. I spent that week on the beach sipping piña coladas while half the Willow Creek HOA panicked trying to figure out how to get their precious cars out of my garage. They called tow trucks. They called the police. They even called the city zoning office. And every single one of them told Karen the same thing. Ma'am, it's private property. The owner can secure it however he wants. I guess you could say karma was finally parked in the right spot. By the second day of my Florida vacation, I had developed a new morning ritual, coffee, ocean breeze, and scrolling through the angry voicemails of an HOA president unraveling in real time. The first message was, polite, fake polite anyway. Eric, this is Karen Violet. There seems to be a small misunderstanding. Some of our members left their cars near your building and can't retrieve them. If you could just unlock the garage, we can clear everything up. Small misunderstanding, right. The second message was less composed. Eric, I don't appreciate being ignored. You're holding our vehicles hostage, and that's a crime. I've already contacted the police. I could hear people arguing in the background, someone yelling, tell him about the insurance, and another voice, probably Mark, saying, just calm down, Karen. By voicemail number 8, she was in full meltdown mode. "You can't keep us trapped like this. I'll have you arrested. My lawyer is already drafting a cease and desist." I sipped my coffee and smiled. "Sure, Karen," I murmured to myself. "You do that." Back home, my phone kept buzzing for 3 straight days. The police had called once too, but not for the reason she hoped. "Mr. Miller said, a polite officer over the phone, we received a complaint from the Willow Creek HOA about vehicles locked inside your property. Can you confirm if this is accurate?" "Yep," I said calmly. "They're on my private land inside my locked commercial garage." "They entered without permission." The officer hesitated. "Did you give any of them consent to park there?" "Nope." "Are there posted signs warning against unauthorized parking?" "There are 6 of them," I said. "I can send photos." "Please do," he replied. I heard him sigh quietly. "Between you and me, sir, sounds like a civil matter. We'll let them know they need to resolve it with you directly." And just like that, my 1 ounce of worry disappeared. By midweek, word of the garage hostage situation had spread through the entire HOA like wildfire. My lawyer, Rachel Green, called me to give me the best news I'd heard all year. "Eric, you're clean. You followed every legal step. You warned them, you posted signs, and they entered voluntarily. The police report confirms no damage, no personal injury, and full ownership rights in your name." "Beautiful," I said, watching seagulls dive across the shoreline. "So what happens next?" She laughed. "Next, you enjoy the rest of your trip and let Karen dig her own grave." And oh, did she. According to Rachel, Karen had spent the entire week harassing the local police department, the city zoning board, and even the mayor's office, insisting that my warehouse overlapped community property lines. Unfortunately for her, the city records showed something inconvenient. My building had existed for 12 years, 9 years before the HOA was even founded. Rachel forwarded me a scanned document from the county assessor, complete with a date stamp and my signature. "That woman can scream all she wants," Rachel said. "The map doesn't lie." Meanwhile, the HOA members were starting to turn on each other. I heard about it through Jake, who texted me updates from the warehouse parking lot like a gossip columnist. "Jake, dude, you won't believe this. Karen's out here yelling at Mark and Linda. Apparently they're blaming her for getting their cars locked. Me tell them to enjoy their community bonding time. Jake, bro, they called a towing company, but the driver refused. Said he can't remove vehicles from private property without owner permission. Me. That driver deserves a medal." The HOA's panic had officially turned into chaos. By day 5, Karen was threatening to sue me, the locksmith, the city, and somehow even Jake. "You enabled this," she screamed at him when he arrived for his shift. "You're his employee, aren't you? You're part of this conspiracy." Jake just shrugged and said, "Lady, I just drive trucks." Back in Florida, I lived like a king. My hotel balcony overlooked the ocean, and every sunrise looked like something out of a postcard. I ate overpriced seafood napped by the pool and called Ben Alvarez just to thank him for building a fortress strong enough to survive Hurricane Karen. By Thursday, the voicemails had slowed down. The rage had burned into exhaustion. The final one I listened to that night made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled my drink. "Eric," Karen said, her tone trembling somewhere between fury and desperation. "If you think this is over, you're mistaken. We'll take this to court. You'll pay for every day those cars were trapped, and when we win, I'll make sure the county revokes your permit. You'll never run another business here again." She ended the message with a dramatic click. I saved the voicemail. It would make a great ringtone. When my flight landed back home that Saturday, the first thing I did was stop by the warehouse. I hadn't told anyone I was back. Not even Jake. I wanted to see the scene for myself. The morning sun was blinding as I turned into the lot. My shiny new locks gleamed in the light, untouched and perfect. But it was the noise that got me, voices echoing inside, muffled by metal. I killed the engine, stepped out, and just listened. "Hello," someone shouted. "Is anyone out there?" I walked to the side window and peered in. There they were, Karen and her entourage, standing between their cars, sweaty, red-faced, and absolutely miserable. It looked like they'd been camping out. Linda was fanning herself with a folder. Mark was pacing like a caged zoo animal. And Karen, well, Karen looked like someone who just realized her empire had fallen. I unlocked the side door slowly, the sound of the latch echoing like thunder. Karen's head snapped up. "Eric," she barked. "Finally, do you have any idea what you've done?" I stepped inside, hands in my pockets, trying not to smile too hard. "Oh, I have a pretty good idea. You can't just lock people's cars in," she shouted. "That's illegal." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's not. The police already confirmed. My lawyer too." She sputtered. "This is outrageous. We'll sue you for damages." I looked around the garage at the tire marks, the empty wine bottles, and the scratches on the walls. "You might want to be careful with that word. Because as of right now, you owe me for property damage, trespassing, and interfering with my business. Karen froze. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, I said, smiling. And here's the fun part, I already did. My lawyer filed the paperwork yesterday. The color drained from her face. Behind her, Linda muttered, I told you we shouldn't have parked here. Karen turned on her instantly. Quiet. Linda, this isn't my fault. Oh, really? Mark snapped. Because it sure feels like your fault. The argument exploded right there in the garage, voices overlapping, fingers pointing, chaos, spiraling. I watched for a minute, just long enough to enjoy the show, then raised a hand. All right, everyone out, I said. Cars, people, all of it. Now. Karen hesitated, glaring at me like she wanted to throw her wine glass, but she knew she'd lost. I unlocked the main door and stepped aside. One by one, they filed out, silent and humiliated. The last one to leave was Karen. She stopped by her. Lexus turned to me and hissed, "This isn't over, Eric." I leaned against the doorframe. "You're right, it's not." Then I clicked the door closed behind her and locked it again. That afternoon, Rachel called. "Eric, I just got word the court accepted your filing. The HOA's lawyer wants mediation, but honestly, they don't have a leg to stand on. The police report alone sinks them." "Good," I said. "Let's do this right," Rachel chuckled. "You really locked them up for a week." "Hey," I said. "They wanted free parking. I just gave them an extended stay." For the first time in months, the warehouse was quiet again. No cars, no HOA banners, no smug laughter echoing through my walls. But I wasn't done yet. Because when it came to people like Karen, violent justice needed to be public. And soon she'd learn that payback doesn't end with a lock. Sometimes it ends in court with the whole neighborhood watching. When I say the courthouse was packed, I mean standing room only. Even the hallway outside buzzed with whispers. Apparently news travels fast when the self-proclaimed Queen of Willow Creek HOA drags a local business owner into court, especially after that week-long garage incident everyone in town had heard about. I stood next to my lawyer, Rachel Green, in the small courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and bad perfume. Across from us sat Karen Violet, draped in pastel pink and false confidence, flanked by two HOA board members, Mark and Linda, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Karen had traded her wine glass for a stack of manila folders, her face set in the kind of smugness only desperation can produce. She didn't look at me, she looked at the judge. And when the judge, Honorable Walter Daniels, an older man with gray hair and no tolerance for nonsense, walked in the room, fell silent. "Case number 521A, the clerk read. Willow Creek Homeowners Association versus Eric Miller. Rachel leaned close and whispered, "Don't react to anything. Just let them talk first." Karen's the kind of person who'll bury herself before we say a word. I nodded, biting back a smile. Karen rose first. Her voice quivered with forced authority. "Your Honor, the defendant maliciously confined property belonging to our association members for an entire week. He caused emotional distress, financial burden, and humiliation to our community. We are seeking damages for impound fees, rental car costs, and emotional suffering." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Emotional suffering from your cars being locked." Karen nodded solemnly, as if she were discussing a natural disaster. "Yes, Your Honor. Many of our members rely on their vehicles for daily work and errands. Mr. Miller intentionally locked them inside his building, depriving us of access." Rachel stood. "Permission to respond, Your Honor." "Proceed," said the judge. "First, let's clarify," Rachel said, flipping open her binder. "The HOA's vehicles were not locked inside. They were parked without permission on my client's private property inside a commercial building they broke into. We have photographic evidence showing damaged locks, displaced equipment, and posted signage that clearly reads, 'Unauthorized vehicles will be towed.'" Rachel handed the judge a folder. Karen's smile faltered slightly. The judge squinted at the photos, half a dozen SUVs and sedans lined up neatly under my fluorescent lights. He looked up unimpressed. "Mrs. Violet, these vehicles are clearly inside Mr. Miller's garage." Karen laughed nervously. "It's a bit misleading, Your Honor. That area is part of the community's shared access zone." Rachel was ready for that one. She slid another document forward. "Here's the county property map. The boundary line shows Mr. Miller's land clearly separated from the Willow Creek subdivision. This building was constructed 10 years before the HOA existed." The judge examined it. "Mrs. Violet, do you have any documentation proving your association owns or has access rights to this land?" Karen's smile froze. "We haven't updated our community maps yet, but..." "So that's a no," her lips twitched. "Not At this time, Your Honor. Rachel continued, her tone calm but cutting. Additionally, the plaintiff is claiming emotional distress. However, I have a series of emails and photos time-stamped dated before the incident showing that Mr. Miller repeatedly warned the HOA to stop trespassing. The judge leaned forward as Rachel read from one of my old emails aloud. Hi Karen, please remind your members that parking or entering my property without authorization is considered trespassing. This is a commercial loading area and not community space. Eric Miller. Rachel turned to the judge. That was 3 months before this incident. Karen jumped up. Those emails were harassing. He was threatening us with towing. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, Mrs. Violet. She obeyed, face red as a fire hydrant. Rachel smiled faintly. One more thing, Your Honor. After the vehicles were removed, my client filed a countersuit for damages. We have invoices for repair costs to the garage door, photos of tire damage, and proof of lost business during that week due to blocked access. Total estimated losses $6,400. The judge flipped through the evidence and looked at me. Mr. Miller, you said the police were contacted. Yes, Your Honor, I said. They confirmed I was within my rights to secure my property. I have the officer's statement on file. Rachel handed over the report. The judge read it quietly for a moment, then looked at Karen. Mrs. Violet, did you contact law enforcement at the time? She straightened her blazer. Yes, Your Honor. But they refused to intervene. Why? Karen hesitated. Because they didn't understand the situation. The courtroom chuckled softly. Even the bailiff smirked. Rachel delivered the final blow with the kind of precision that made me proud to pay her hourly rate. Your Honor, she said, what we have here isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern of entitlement. The HOA repeatedly ignored clear warnings, invaded a commercial property, and damaged private infrastructure, all while claiming some imaginary shared access. Mr. Miller didn't lock them in. They locked themselves in by parking where they didn't belong. Karen slammed her palm on the table. That's outrageous. We're a community organization. We represent homeowners. The judge sighed. Mrs. Violet, being part of an HOA doesn't place you above property law. But he humiliated us, she snapped. He mocked us online. He left us stranded. Rachel leaned forward. Your Honor, if we're discussing humiliation, I'd like to submit Exhibit D security footage showing Mrs. Violet and her members hosting a wine party inside my client's garage without consent. Karen's face went pale. That's taken out of context. The judge adjusted his glasses, watching the silent footage play on the small monitor, Karen laughing, glass of Merlot in hand, surrounded by cars and folding chairs. The entire courtroom erupted in laughter. When it ended, the judge took a long breath and said, Mrs. Violet, I'm going to be very honest. You're lucky Mr. Miller didn't press criminal charges. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He continued, the evidence is overwhelming. You and your association trespassed, caused property damage, and ignored repeated warnings. As for your claim of emotional distress, consider it dismissed. You can't break into someone's property, get caught, and then sue them for your feelings. Rachel nodded. We request reimbursement for damages and legal fees, Your Honor. Granted, said the judge, banging his gavel. Case dismissed in favor of the defendant, Eric Miller. The room erupted, half in applause, half in stunned silence. Mark rubbed his temples. Linda muttered something about selling her house, and Karen stood frozen, her pink blazer trembling with rage. She pointed at me as I turned to leave. You think this is over? You humiliated me in front of my entire community, I smiled. You did that yourself, Karen. The bailiff gently ushered her back as Rachel and I walked out into the hallway. Nice work in there, I said, handing her a small envelope. Bonus for making her implode faster than I expected. Rachel laughed. I didn't even have to try. That woman's a one-woman demolition crew. We walked down the courthouse steps into the sunlight. Reporters, yes, actual local reporters, were waiting because apparently HOA locks cars and garage had become small-town headline gold. One of them shouted, Mr. Miller, any comment about your victory? I shrugged. Just glad the court believes in property rights. And good locks. That night I celebrated with my crew. Jake grilled steaks behind the warehouse, Tyler brought cheap beer, and Monica strung fairy lights along the fence. You really showed her, Jake said between bites. Karen looked like she was going to melt right there. Yeah, Tyler laughed. Think she'll ever park here again? I raised my glass. If she does, she can stay as long as she wants. I'll make sure the locks are ready. We all laughed, the kind of deep, satisfied laugh that comes from surviving months of madness. For once, the warehouse didn't feel like just a workplace. It felt like a victory monument. And while Karen Violet was probably at home drafting one of her infamous open letters to the community, I slept better than I had in years, knowing the law karma and one very solid steel lock were all on my side. 2 weeks after the court hearing, Willow Creek HOA no longer existed. It started quietly. The morning after the verdict, I drove past their fancy community center, the same brick building that started all this, and saw a handwritten sign taped across the glass door. Meeting cancelled. HOA board dissolved until further notice. Apparently the members had held an emergency vote the night before. When the court ordered the HOA to pay for my legal fees, property damages, and lost revenue, the entire association fund was wiped out in one swoop. Add Karen's personal fine for trespassing and tampering with private property, another $2,500, and she was done for. Rumor had it that the remaining homeowners voted to suspend the board entirely. Some even started a petition to permanently dissolve the HOA altogether. By the end of the week, the Willow Creek Homeowners Association sign was gone, the Facebook page was deleted, and Karen Violet's name had become something of a neighborhood joke. I didn't mean to destroy an entire HOA. I just wanted them to stop stealing my parking. But as Rachel liked to say, some people dig their own holes. You just have to hand them the shovel. When I pulled into my warehouse lot that morning, Jake was already there, leaning against his van with a grin plastered on his face. "Boss," he said, pointing to the new sign I'd ordered. "Tell me that's not permanent." I looked up at the massive metal plate bolted to the front of the garage. HOA-free zone trespassers will be locked in again. I couldn't help but laugh. Consider it art. Tyler pulled up a moment later and whistled. "Man, Karen's gonna lose her mind when she sees that." Jake smirked. "If she ever shows her face again?" "Oh, she will," I said. "Karen Violet doesn't fade quietly." And sure enough, she didn't. That same afternoon, while I was checking deliveries, I saw her silver Lexus creeping down the alley. She parked at the curb window, cracked sunglasses on, pretending to scroll her phone. I stood there with my clipboard, pretending not to notice. But then slowly she stepped out. Her heels clicked across the pavement. She looked different, tired, worn out, but the attitude was still there, like a perfume that wouldn't wash off. "Eric," she said, her voice carefully calm. "Karen," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "How's community leadership treating you these days?" Her jaw tightened. "I came to apologize." That stopped me cold. "You, what?" She exhaled slowly. "I went too far. I shouldn't have let things get that bad." For a brief second I almost believed her, but then she added, "You embarrassed me. Publicly. You didn't have to humiliate me in court." Ah, there it was, the real Karen. I set my clipboard down and leaned against the garage door. "Karen, you broke into my building, threw parties in my workspace, ignored every warning I gave you, and then tried to sue me. I didn't humiliate you. You did that all by yourself." Her lips pressed together. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "No," I said. "Just persistent." She glared at me for a long moment before saying, "Well, enjoy your little victory, Eric. You won't always have the upper hand." Then she got back in her Lexus and drove away, tires screeching just enough to let me know she was still angry. Jake appeared from behind a delivery truck, shaking his head. "That woman's allergic to accountability." "Yeah," I said with a grin. "But at least she learned what a lock is for." A few months passed. Business picked up again. We even landed a new shipping contract that let me expand the warehouse. I added security cameras, brighter floodlights, and automatic gates that opened only by employee code. It wasn't paranoia, it was peace of mind. I'd also started something new, a small side hustle, making custom signs for other small business owners who dealt with entitled HOA groups. My favorite order so far read, "Private property home members will be photographed, reported, and possibly memmed." That one sold like crazy. Rachel called one morning to give me an update. By the way, Karen Violet's appeal was officially denied. The judge ruled the original verdict stands. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "You're kidding." "Nope." And guess what? She tried to start another HOA under a new name, didn't even make it past the filing stage. City zoning shut it down. "Poetic justice," I said. "Sweet, isn't it?" Rachel replied. "By the way, a local news blog just ran an article about your case. You're kind of famous now. They called you the man who locked out the HOA." I groaned. "Great. That's not going to help my dating life." She laughed. "On the contrary, it might. Women love a man who enforces boundaries." Later that week, I took a walk around the neighborhood. Without Karen's iron fist, Willow Creek actually looked normal. Kids were riding bikes again. People were chatting over fences. No one was measuring grass height or checking mailbox paint colors. Linda the realtor spotted me from her driveway. She waved awkwardly before calling out, "Hey, Eric, no hard feelings, right?" "None at all," I said. "Just glad you got your car back." She laughed nervously. "Yeah, my husband still teases me about that. Says it's the most expensive wine party he's ever missed." We both laughed, and for once it felt genuine. Across the street, I saw Mark mowing his lawn shirtless, beer in hand. I had to admit the man looked happier now that he wasn't pretending to be an HOA vice president. He noticed me and raised his beer like a peace offering. And for the first time in months, I realized something: maybe the war with the HOA had actually improved the neighborhood. Without rules for everything, people finally acted like neighbors instead of petty enforcers. One evening, I was closing up the warehouse when Jake asked boss if you could go back. "Would you do it again? Lock them in, I mean." I thought about it for a long moment. "Yeah," I said finally. "But maybe I'd install a snack machine first. You know, for their comfort." He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his toolbox. "You're evil, man." "Not evil," I said. "Efficient." A month later, I got one last email from Karen Violet. It was short-clipped and clearly written with gritted teeth. "Eric, the HOA is officially disbanded. I've sold my home and am moving out of state. I still believe I was right, but I don't have the energy to fight anymore. Good luck with your business, Karen." I stared at that message for a long minute before typing my reply. "Karen, thank you for the update. I genuinely hope you find peace wherever you move next. P.S. Don't forget to check the garage before you leave. Eric." I hit send, smiled, and shut my laptop. That night I walked outside, the evening air crisp and quiet. The garage lights hummed softly, the new locks glinting under the security lamps. I leaned against the truck and watched the sun dip behind the trees. Sometimes revenge doesn't need fire or fury. Sometimes it's just about letting people feel the consequences of their own arrogance long enough for reality to sink in. Karen Violet had spent her whole life trying to control everyone around her. But in the end, the one thing she couldn't control was me. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all. When people hear stories like this, they always ask, "Eric, was it worth it? Was the revenge worth the chaos?" The answer's simple. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. It was about standing up for what's yours when others think they can walk all over you. Whether it's a nosy HOA president, a power-hungry neighbor, or anyone who mistakes kindness for weakness, sometimes the only way to teach boundaries is to enforce them. I learned that silence can be louder than shouting, and that a locked door can send a stronger message than 1,000 arguments. So, here's my advice to anyone dealing with their own Karen Violet. Stay calm, stay lawful, and stay firm. You don't need to fight dirty, you just need to close the door and walk away smiling. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if someone used your garage like their personal parking lot? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more HOA justice stories. Because sometimes karma doesn't knock, it just locks the door.